Hello everyone, it's good to see you. So this week the topic is ego and conceit, and last time we were covering the three types of conceit. This time the topic of the talk is good ego, bad ego, no ego. Okay, so what is that ego thing that we so often talk about? What's the self? Does it really exist? Is it a good thing? Is it bad? Some people have the idea that the self motivates them. It's something that's really important. Others think that the self is something to get rid of, something to kill, that's kind of bad and unspiritual. It's not good to have a self. You should actually be totally empty all the time. And yet others, they believe that there is no such thing as a self at all. They start out with that very idea. So there's all kinds of confusions about this topic for sure. So what is the self, first of all? The self is, you can say, it's something that exists by virtue of a label that is assigned to a certain group of things. To give you an example, would be a forest. Okay, the forest in itself exists. You can say that there is such a thing as a forest. Conventionally, when I say, look over there at this beautiful forest, and we say, yes, that I can see it. It's right there. But if you observe closer, if you really start searching for the forest, then you will find that forest is simply a word that is put on an accumulation of trees. Right? But if you really go out and search for it, then all you can find is, well, trees, earth, roots, leaves, worms, ants, and all these components that make a forest. Right? But the forest is not a thing that you can find anywhere. So if you would split the forest into all its tiny particles and atoms, let's say, and you would analyze each and every single one of those atoms, whether it is a forest, you'd have to say no to each one of those atoms. None of these atoms actually is a forest, right? But then people say, well, when they come together, though, then that's a forest. When you put all these atoms together in a certain arrangement, then we call it forest. And that is correct, but not ultimately correct. So we have two kind of truths, you can say. We have a conventional truth and we have an ultimate truth. Ultimately, there is no such thing as a forest. You can't find it, right? Conventionally, however, meaning existing as a label, there is such a thing, consisting of a concept. It's a mental concept that we have. Same is true for Thailand, for example. If you really search for the thing Thailand, you won't find it anywhere. There's only a bunch of atoms: rocks, water, fire, earth, wind. And then we have that convention. We all agree to call this place Thailand. I'm in Thailand right now. And it's true. Okay, so that we can't deny that. It would be absolutely absurd if you would say such a thing that no, Thailand does not exist. That's a big mistake. It would be more correct to say, ultimately, there is no such thing as a Thailand to be found anywhere. That is more correct. But to say Thailand doesn't exist, that's silly. It does exist, yes. So Toby does exist too. I'm talking to you right now, right? And if you have a group of people and then someone calls you out, someone says, hey Paul, who will lift the hand? It's going to be you, right? Or if there's any other Paul in here, then you lift your hand too. So there is meaning to that, and this is very, very important to recognize, because if you dive deeper into this topic, very easily you get lost in these philosophical adventures, and then quickly you just get the idea, well, there is no Paul or there is no Toby. People like that often talk in very fancy ways then. They say, yes, they don't say, I'm walking to this shop now. They say that there is walking, but no one walks. It makes them appear very mystical. But it becomes like super complicated and unnatural and kind of, how do you say, it becomes an obstacle. You can't live a normal life if you try to somehow change your language so it's in accordance with ultimate truth. It's pointless, because ultimate truth is anyways beyond any words. It's beyond any language. Okay? So the self exists, but it doesn't exist in the way we think it does. In other words, it isn't as it seems. It isn't as it appears. So how does the self actually appear? Well, it appears like a solid, unchanging entity that owns a body and a mind, or is a body and a mind, and that somehow has a life, and it must run that life in some way, so that it has a happy end at some point. Yeah. So that is the way our self appears, like a solid, separate, real thing. But that's not the way it really is. Now let's come back to the forest example. You have that label, forest, which is assigned on a bunch of atoms. You have all these atoms, you call it forest. Now if you go through each one of these atoms, you cannot find any atom that is actually forest. If you have 5 glasses of orange juice, they're all orange juice, right? You put them all into a jug together. Now do you suddenly have milk? No, right? It's still orange juice, because glass number 1 is not milk. Glass number 2 is not milk. Glass number 3 is not milk, etc. So if you pour them together, where should milk come from? Yes. Same with the atoms. If you put them together, where would the forest suddenly come from? Out of 100 trillion, billion, whatever, non-forests. How can we get a forest out of that? So it exists purely as a conception, as an idea in the mind. And we project it onto that collection of trees, that forest thing. Or ourselves, I'm Toby, I'm like this, I'm like that. In reality, there is no fixed, solid entity called Toby, which somehow lives behind my eyes, in my head. It has a bunch of buttons to push so that it kind of manages life that way. That's the way often it feels like there is some entity inside of that body that runs the show, and that must make sure that it does it right. But that kind of entity, that is an illusion. That doesn't really exist like that. The self that we have, that we can use as a convention, does exist, however, yes? We can use it. It is a useful tool. And it also is very much like a raft or like a boat that gets you to the island of enlightenment. That gets you to a point where you don't need it anymore. So when you're on the ocean and you're on your raft or in your boat, the boat serves a purpose. It gets you to a point where you don't need it anymore. It gets you to the island. Once you're on the island, you don't need to carry the boat around with you. You can leave it at the beach. It has served its purpose, right? So the self is kind of like the same thing. So since your self is empty, it can be shaped into whatever. So what that means in clear words is you can actually design yourself. You can literally reshape your brain, for example. You can reshape the way you think. You can reshape the way you feel. If you had a choice, if you could choose what you want to feel, what would you like to feel then? And I say it like it's a thing that could be the case. Like if you had a choice. Well, fact is, you do. You have a choice. You can decide how you want to feel. You can decide how you want to think. You can decide how you want to shape your innermost being, your mind, your emotions. You can, and you should, have some control over that. Like, you need to decide how you want to feel, right? But is that really the case? Do we really kind of have that freedom? Let's be honest. Like, I don't like to feel angry. Let's take the example of the dog over there, for example. He's just out there. And he sounds like, he does these heartbreaking sounds. Yes. He did it yesterday all night. It was raining, he was out there. He was doing all these sounds. And then, I get angry. I get angry at the owners of the dog. That's not a pleasant feeling. I think, why did they do this to this poor dog, and we need to get over there. So that anger doesn't solve the problem. It creates more problem, doesn't it? Yes. So what would maybe solve the problem would be compassion or kindness or communication. But me being in my mat, just being grumpy, doesn't help. Would you agree with that? Yes, it never helps. It just creates more anger in this world. Okay? So upon recognizing that, then I have a choice. But if I don't recognize, if I'm not mindful of it, then I'm overruled by that emotion. I become that emotion. The emotion rides me like a cowboy would ride a horse. And I don't decide where I want to go, because it's the cowboy that says where I want to go. So if I have an angry cowboy riding me, then I don't know where I will go. Maybe to angry country, right? There'll be a whole lot of gunfights and all that kind of stuff. I don't really want to go there, because the horse suffers the rider's decisions. And so if anger is in control, if anger is in charge, then what's my direction? It's going to be in alignment with that particular state. So whatever state you're in right now, that state is what you're riding, or it's what's riding you. And as soon as you have mindfulness, the role changes. You become the cowboy or the cowgirl. And you ride. That's the difference. But if you're not mindful, then, well, it's pretty chaotic. Because the riders are going to change all the time. Sometimes it'll be happiness, sometimes it'll be anger, sometimes kindness, sometimes jealousy, whatever. And so you're at the whim of these emotions and thoughts continuously. Because every emotion, every thought kind of is, it helps to build a self. It gives it's almost like it gives the self something to feed on. Like your anger, for example. When the anger arises and it comes up, your self can eat. It can eat that anger, and it can make itself bigger with it. And that is usually experienced as the sensation of, I'm so angry right now. I'm so angry. That means you're already feeding of the anger. Even worse, you've already gotten born into the anger. You are reborn. This is rebirth, by the way. Like otherwise, anger would just float by, right? Why jump into it if you had mindfulness? You could make the choice, no, I'm not going to be ridden by that horse. By that cowboy. Yeah, so I'm not going to board that train, if you want to use a bit of more modern example. I'm not going to board that car, I'm not going to board that train. Because I know where it leads. So you're not getting born into the emotion or into that thought. So you're not becoming a self based on a simple natural sensation. Now, anger in itself is neither good nor bad, nor is it anything in itself as such. It becomes good or bad or whatever as soon as you become it, as soon as you are born into it, as soon as you express it through your personality, through this body and mind. Then it's a fire. It's like your house is burning. And if the fire is not quickly extinguished, it will spread. It's what fires do. As long as the fire has some food, some nutrition, it will just keep burning. And so anger is pretty much like a fire. It just can burn everything down. It can destroy your relationships in an instant. It's just one tiny remark that you make and your whole life goes downhill. Just one tiny little thing you say and everything goes down the drain. Right? It's tiny things, like people make these tiny little things, these tiny decisions, and based on that, everything changes. So we've got to be really, really careful. That means being really mindful, like what am I harboring right now? What kind of emotion, what kind of state am I harboring? And is there a risk that I'm born into that state? That I'm living through that state? And if you have that kind of mindfulness, first of all, you can actually choose what kind of states to get born into. Remember, the self is a raft, and if you get born into the right kind of states, your life is getting better and better. You're reshaping yourself, redesigning yourself. You literally choose who you want to be. Because you can. Isn't that good news? It's great news. I love it. Every time I say that, I've said it many, many times, and I don't feel bored. I think it's amazing that we can have that choice. Who do I want to be? Do I want to be kind? Do I want to be compassionate? Sure do. I sure do. So what can I do to make that stronger? Well, I can enter these states right now. I can feed them with my attention. I can let them grow, and I can feel like a kind person. Can you feel like a kind person? Can you feel that you are a really kind person? Many people can't. Maybe you might say right now, sure, no problem, easy. But deep down inside there is a block for most people. Because most people don't like themselves very much. There's a lot of self-hate, a lot of pretense going on in the mind. And so that will take you deeper down into that rabbit hole. On the way of becoming a being that is more kind, you will have to encounter those things, these other beliefs and whatever conditions in your mind and in your emotional being that actually are opposing that creation. So the good news is that you can create. The quote-unquote bad news is that you have already created a lot and you're carrying it all around. So it's not just only, I'm going to create myself as a loving, kind person, but on the other hand, also I need to recognize where is the falsehood, where is the bad selves that I've created that talk in the back of my mind. And some are very subtle, they're very sneaky, they look like they're really good, and they're here to protect me and serve me. Like, for example, I have one of myself that would consistently worry about the future. And whenever I would question that self, it would have very good reasons for its worry. Super convincing. And it's not just that it says convincing logical things, it feels like I really need it to survive. And if I would abandon that worrying self, my life would just break apart. And so that worrying self feels very justified. It feels like of course, I must stick around because I'm the one keeping you safe. But in reality, that worrying self doesn't keep me safe at all. What it does is it perpetuates a highly negative state. It makes that stronger, deeper. And every state that you're holding on to, every state that you're embodying in emotional, in your energy, in your mind, in your thoughts, in your physical being, every state that you're embodying creates a corresponding external reality over time, not instantly. Fortunately, not instantly. That would be chaotic. If instantly everything would correspond with your inner state, that would be absolutely crazy. Imagine. Every random thought you have instantly manifests. That is the case, by the way, when you are dreaming. Every little change in the mind instantly is reflected in your environment. You think of, like I had that recently in a dream, I was just thinking of, oh yeah, I was in an airplane and the airplane was crashing. And I was like, oh, the airplane is crashing. And okay, I just need to relax then. And so I relaxed. And the airplane just going down, and so I felt really comfortable. I was just surrendering to the crash. And as I surrendered, I was like, oh, maybe we're just having a safe landing. And of course, we just had a safe landing. After everything was just going downhill, a little change of thought made the airplane land safely. And I had many, many examples in my dreams where the environment immediately corresponds with my thought, with my feelings. Okay. Another one was I saw a lion that was charging at me. And again, I just surrendered, and the lion just stopped in front of me and turned into a tiny little cute dog. Yeah, that was not scary at all. So this is the case in dreaming, but it kind of reflects on one scale how it is in your daily life. Life is very much like a dream. And the reality that you create around you is based on the reality that you hold inside of yourself, persistently. Now, why is the reality that we experience rather inconsistent and chaotic? If you look at your mind, that's the answer. Is your mind consistent? How consistent is your attention, for example? How consistently are you focused on one single thought? Almost not, right? Not at all, yes. And if so, then only for short times. Now that's why life corresponds with that. It's pretty jumpy, unpredictable. You don't know what's going to happen. Yes. Because you don't know even what's going to happen in your mind next. What are you going to think in the next 10 minutes? What am I going to say in the next 10 minutes? I have no idea. I don't know. It's an adventure. Let's see what happens, right? So you can live like that. That's okay. It's not a problem with that at all. You just surrender to what is going on. Or you can also choose to actively create. And then you want to do that from the inside out. Creating a self that really serves you. That leads you ideally beyond itself. So that would be then creating a good self and abandoning bad selves. Like, let's not call it good, bad. Let's call it skillful and unskillful. I like that word more. Skillful is anything that leads towards more happiness, more kindness, more compassion. Unskillful is the opposite. Leads to more anger, more worries, more hardship, more pain. You abandon that. And you cultivate what's good, what serves you, what empowers you. And it's important to find out, what is it that really empowers you? What is it? What would be an ideal self? Then learn to embody that, feel that. With every fiber of your being, you can feel that you are kind. And yes, the mind will say, no, but you're not really kind, you're just pretending to be kind. Maybe it says that. In my case, it tends to do that. The mind says, no, you're not really a kind person, you're only pretending that right now. That's okay. That's what the mind has to say. It's just, its programming goes like that. Then you let it talk. You also need to know how to let go of these harmful or unskillful types of selves and their talk. So you need to recognize their voices and say, okay, you can talk as much as you want. It's not on my business. That's how you take away the power of those selves. How do you do it? It doesn't matter anymore. Things only have power over you as long as they matter. If they don't matter, then they have no power over you. They cannot determine your internal state anymore. So this is how you let go. You don't fight them, because that would mean it matters to you, right? If you're fighting against your thoughts, I have all these bad negative thoughts, when will they ever stop? There's another one. It's right there. I can see it so clearly. Well, all your attention goes there. It seems to matter a lot. What if you wouldn't care? Say, it's just a thought. Who cares? You're immediately at ease. It doesn't matter anymore. So you are free to relax. When you relax, then there is a bit of space. Then in that space, you can simply expand. And out of that space, you can form, you can recreate yourself. You retrain the way you think about yourself, about others. Make it skillful, make it beautiful, so that when you do your last breath, you really shaped your body and mind into a piece of art. Everything you did, you thought, you said, you felt is admirable, it's noble, it's nice. So you want to create yourself into something that you would really respect. That's called then self-respect, right? You embody qualities that are noble, that are really worthwhile, that make you feel like, well, I could die today and it would be a great time for it. I did really well. There's nothing to regret. There's no open, unfinished business. I'm totally at ease. That's a beautiful state to live in. And so the deeper you're able to let go of these harmful, negative states and cultivate the positive, uplifting states, the thinner yourself becomes. The beautiful thing about kindness and compassion, etc., is it thins out the self. It makes it very thin. That's why these states are so divine. They're so luminous. They're so beautiful. They're all-pervasive. The Buddha also calls them a divine abode. The practice of the divine abodes or divine dwelling places predates the Buddha, actually. There was a common practice in India to cultivate kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, these four. So if you can embody those states, if you can vibrate in these frequencies, then great things come out of that. And one of the greatest things is a thinning out of the self. If you're kind, it almost by definition, it means you have to be unselfish. If you're compassionate, it doesn't work if you're thinking much of yourself. Compassion, you have to kind of let go of the pain. You have to see that we are all pretty much the same in that sense that we experience pain and that we don't want to experience pain. It allows you to connect, and that connection is a thinning out of the self. When you're kind, you're giving something to someone else, it's a thinning out of the self, it's a thinning out of holding on to stuff and things. And you can see some people before they die, they become incredibly kind. It's that this is the power, this luminosity that we feel through them, is this incredible kindness. They're super vulnerable because they have nothing to lose. They have no more self-image to hold up, so they're free to just shine. Some, not everyone. It's much more common to just be bitter when people die, full of regrets. But for some, yes, they really open up. And it's quite an incredible thing to witness. I was very fortunate to witness my mother passing away just like that. This thinning out and this becoming incredibly graceful. The nurses were hanging out in her room to relax, to take a break from their hard work. They were taking care of people who were dying, you know. It's a palliative care unit, so you have all these people who are dying there. And all this heavy, you know, it's a very heavy atmosphere there, very heavy. And in that heaviness, they went to the room of my mom very often and just held her hands and just sit there to just take a break, you know. And the closer she got to death, the more happy she became, the more kind of released she became. It's pretty amazing to see that, and I'm happy that I could see that. Very inspiring. That is inspiring. I want to die like that. And ideally, I want to open up like that before I die. Just imagine the benefit of that. And imagine if you could do that, to open up to such a degree even before you die. And that is what the great master Ajahn Chah, what he actually said is, someone asked him, what's the purpose of being born? And his answer was, to die before you die. And that's pretty straightforward. And so many people misinterpret it. They think, oh, it means I need to get rid of myself then, before I actually die. I need to destroy the ego, get rid of it, see through it. That's not really the right approach. You don't want to push against it. It means it matters still. But if you open clearly, deeply into kindness, there is a thinning out gradually. Yourself becomes so thin that in the end it's so easy to let it go. You've arrived at the beach. It's easy to exit the boat. You will not drown. You're safe. You can let go of the boat. And you let go of a good boat. And you let go with gratitude. You're not letting go like, finally I got rid of you, you stupid self. Like stupid ego, you know. That's not the way. But you let go with gratitude. You feel amazingly grateful that you had such a skillful self that brought you to the other shore. So that's the idea of the path. So that's kind of all that comes to mind. It's a bit of a funny topic. Good self, bad self, no self.